Okay guys, go ahead and open your reading textbook back up to page 426. You should also have your drawing conclusions chart out. We're going to finish filling that out. And we'll do the second half of Dear Mrs. LaRue today. We'll finish filling out our drawing conclusions chart. And then we're going to do like what we did last week where you answer 3 questions. You choose 3 questions about the story from that very last page, and then you answer them in your notebook. So go ahead. Right now you should be open up to page 426, and we will continue reading. Before you read, I want you to look at the illustrations, the pictures on pages 426 and 427. Let's see if we can find it. Let's look at these similarities and the differences. We've already figured out that the color pictures are what's actually going on, and that the black and white ones are Ike's thoughts, or what he's imagining is happening. Or at least what he's trying to make Mrs. LaRue think is happening. So if we look at the color picture, we see that all these dogs are at a pumpkin festival, which I would think would be pretty fun. It looks like they're all running around, they're playing, they're out in nature. Pumpkin festivals, it's fall, so it's usually the colors are starting to change, the weather's starting to get cooler. But it looks like Ike is all by himself, just watching a squirrel in the tree. He's free to try to climb up that tree. He probably can't do it, but he's free to be able to climb up that tree and really look at that squirrel. In the black and white picture, we can see a similarity is that Ike is looking at a tree with a bird in it, so he is able to see nature. However, the difference is in the real, what's actually going on, the color picture, Ike looks pretty happy to be chasing this squirrel around, watching it. Whereas in the black and white, he looks very sad. He is not free. He's behind bars. But in real life, he's able to chase that squirrel as much as he wants. So in both pictures, he's able to interact with nature. We see him reacting to nature. But the difference is, in the black and white, this is what he wants Mrs. LaRue to think, so that maybe she'll feel bad and come get him. When in real life, this place looks like it might be pretty fun if Ike just gave it a chance. Let's see if he does. I want you to make an inference right now. Do you think, based on Ike's behavior so far, is he going to decide to give it a chance, or is he just going to keep thinking the same thing about it? Let's find out. October 8th. Dear Mrs. LaRue, thank you for the lovely get well card. Still, I'm a little surprised that you didn't come get me. I know what Dr. Wilfrey says, but is it really wise to take risks with one's health? I could have a relapse, you know. With fall here, I think about all the fine times we used to have in the park. Remember how sometimes you would bring along a tennis ball? You would throw it, and I would retrieve it every time, except for once when it landed in something nasty, and I brought you back a stick instead. Ah, how I miss those days. Yours truly, Ike. P.S. Imagine how awful it is for me to be stuck inside my tiny cell. P.P.S. I still feel pretty sick. So again, he's still trying to make Mrs. LaRue think this place is like jail. However, she probably went there before she decided to send Ike there, so she's seen what it really looks like. She also probably knows her dog and knows that he is very melodramatic, and he's probably not experiencing the things that he says. So now we see he's not even really asking her to come get him anymore. Now, he did say he was surprised, but now he's bringing up fun things that they used to do together. Why do you think he's bringing up fun things they used to do together instead of asking her to come get him over and over again? Well, it's probably because so far asking her to come get him has done nothing. Faking sick has done nothing. So now he's trying to remind Mrs. LaRue of the good times so that maybe she'll miss those and come get him. Let's see if it'll work. Go ahead and turn the page and let's keep reading. October 9th. Dear Mrs. LaRue, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I have decided to attempt a daring escape. I'm sorry it has come to this, since I am really a very good dog. But frankly, you left me no choice. How sad is it not to be appreciated? From now on, I'll wander from town to town without a home, or even any dog food, most likely. Such is the life of a desperate outlaw. I will try to write to you from time to time as I carry on with my life of hardship and danger. Your lonely fugitive, Ike. Oh, so now it looks like he's escaped. So far, the plot of this story has been Ike telling Mrs. LaRue false facts about what life is like at the obedience school. So that is the plot of this story. A subplot, or a secondary plot, is something that comes later, which in this case would now be the escape attempt. This is a secondary plot. It's what comes later. Let's see if this actually happens. Oh, now we have another newspaper article. Now remember, I told you to think about that newspaper article at the beginning. Did it sound like a real newspaper article? Did it sound like something that would actually be reported in the newspaper? Do you think it's even though this story is a fantasy, do you think that it's a real newspaper, or maybe it's Ike's imagination? Let's keep going. The Snort City Register-Gazette, October 10th. LaRue escapes doggy detention. Former Snort City resident Ike LaRue escaped last night from the dormitory at the Igor Brotweiler Canine Academy. The dog is described as toothy by local police. His current whereabouts are unknown. To be honest, I thought he was bluffing when he told me he was planning to escape, said a visibly upset Gertrude R. LaRue, the dog's owner. Ike tends to be a bit melodramatic, you know. Now I can only pray that he'll come back. Asked if she would return Ike to Brotweiler Academy, Mrs. LaRue said that she would have to wait and see. He's a good dog, basically, but he can be difficult. So let's think about, let's draw a conclusion based on the evidence that we've gotten here. The evidence we're going to figure out, is this newspaper real, or is it in Ike's head? Is it his imagination or fantasy? Well, first of all, Snort City and Toothy sound like something a dog would say. The place is probably not actually called Snort City. Also, it looks like at the end that Mrs. LaRue is doing what Ike wanted by saying she probably won't send him back. Mrs. LaRue is doing what Ike wants. So based on those clues, I'm coming to the conclusion that the newspaper is in Ike's imagination. So just like what he thinks, the black and white pictures of what he thinks the obedience to school is like, it looks like this newspaper is also in Ike's imagination, because it uses words that a dog would use. It has an article that probably wouldn't be in a real newspaper, and Mrs. LaRue is doing what Ike said. But based on the fact that Ike is escaping, which we'll talk about in a second, from obedience school, Mrs. LaRue would probably be even more mad than she already was. Speaking of his escape, in the black and white picture, we see that Ike looks like he is. There's like a rope that comes down, like maybe he tied all the bed sheets together and climbed down out of the window, like we see in prison movies or escape movies sometimes, and it looks like he's trying to hide from guards that are there. But if we look at the real life picture, he's got a suitcase, there's nobody around, he's putting this letter in the mailbox, and then he's taking a taxi. So his escape was probably more like he just left on his own and nobody said anything to him. Let's keep going. October 11th, somewhere in America. Dear Mrs. LaRue, I continue to suffer horribly as I roam this barren wasteland. Who knows where my wanderings will take me now? Hopefully to someplace with yummy food. Remember the special treats you used to make for me? I miss them. I miss our nice, comfy apartment, but mostly I miss you, your sad dog, Ike. P.S. I even miss the Hibbins cats, in a way. Let's look at the pictures. We see the color picture. Ike is in a restaurant getting some French fries and a hamburger. So the world is probably not the barren wasteland that he's writing about. On the bottom, we see what he wants Mrs. LaRue to think, which is where he's on a train all by himself with just his little bag and nothing else. On the next page, October 12th, still somewhere. Dear Mrs. LaRue, the world is a hard and cruel place for a stray dog. You would scarcely believe the misery I've endured. So I have decided to return home. You may try to lock me up again, but that is a risk I must take. And frankly, even more than myself, I worry about you. You may not know it, Mrs. LaRue, but you need a dog. Your misunderstood friend, Ike. So again, we see he's on an airplane. An airplane is not a hard way to travel. It's pretty nice. And then we see he's thinking about a barren wasteland, which obviously it is not, because he's on a plane, he's got his little peanuts in his drink that they give you, and he's listening to music. So it's not anywhere near as bad as he says. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page. Now we have another newspaper article. Based on the conclusion that we've come to, let's think about this article. The Snort City Register-Gazette, October 13th. Hero dog saves owner. Ike LaRue, until recently a student at the Igor Brotweiler Canine Academy, returned to Snort City yesterday in dramatic fashion. In fact, he arrived just in time to rescue his owner, Gertrude R. LaRue of 2nd Avenue, from an oncoming truck. Mrs. LaRue had made the trip downtown to purchase a new camel's hair coat. Apparently, she neglected to look both ways before stepping out into traffic. The daring rescue was witnessed by several onlookers, including Patrolman Newton Smitzer. He rolled right across 2 lanes of traffic to get at her, said Smitzer. It was really something. I haven't seen rolling like that since I left the police academy. So now that we've come to the conclusion that the newspaper is in Ike's imagination, we can think, maybe this didn't actually happen. Or maybe it did, but maybe it's like at the very beginning, where Ike was pulling Mrs. LaRue across the street and almost got her hit by a car. Maybe it's a similar situation, where maybe he finally got back home, Mrs. LaRue saw him, and again, she ended up in the middle of traffic because of Ike. Now, let's think. So this whole story, Ike has been upset with Mrs. LaRue over her decision to send him, did I say Ike or Mike? I feel like I said Mike, but I meant Ike, over her decision to send him to obedience school. Do you think that him saving her, whether it was true or just in his imagination, will fix the conflict or will end this conflict? Probably not. He probably thinks it'll be over because he saved her life, but Mrs. LaRue is probably still going to be upset that first of all he escaped, second of all, he probably somehow led to her being in traffic a second time, and who knows, maybe he ripped the brand new coat. So it may be over, but I have a feeling that the conflict is just going to keep going because I have a feeling Ike has not learned his lesson. Let's keep reading to see if we find that out. Mrs. LaRue was unhurt in the incident, though her coat was badly torn. I don't care about that, she said. I'm just happy to have my Ike back home where he belongs. LaRue said she plans to throw a big party for the dog. All the neighbors will be there, and I'm going to serve Ike's favorite dishes. I bet he can't wait to taste the chicken pie. Well, we can look at this picture at the bottom of page 435, and he couldn't wait to taste it. It looks like he again got into the pie before Mrs. LaRue got home and was ready. So, our very last conclusion that we're going to draw. Well, first of all, by reading this article, which we've already come to the conclusion that the newspaper is in Ike's imagination, Ike thinks he's a hero. He probably isn't, but Ike thinks he's a hero. So our first clue is Ike thinks he's a hero. We also see he tears Mrs. LaRue's coat again. And we can see he ate the chicken pot pie again. So, first of all, he thinks he's a hero, which he thought at the beginning of the story. He tore Mrs. LaRue's coat, which he did at the beginning of the story. He ate the chicken pot pie, which he did at the beginning of the story. So we can draw the conclusion, even though the story's over and it never actually says whether this is true or not, we can come to the conclusion that Ike hasn't changed. Which means he will most likely end up at the Igor Brotweiler Obedience School, or Obedience Academy, can't remember exactly the name, or Canine Academy, the Igor Brotweiler Canine Academy again. Hopefully this time he'll see that it's actually a pretty fun place and he'll take it seriously and maybe he'll change, or maybe we'll end up going, Mrs. LaRue and Ike will end up going through the same thing all over again. That's where we get to decide what happens next. Okay, turn the page. Let's read about the author. Mark Teague. Mark Teague says that this story is one of his favorites. He had lots of fun pretending he was Ike and writing from a dog's point of view. Mark based Ike on two dogs he and his brother had. One loved to eat, the other dog liked to play tricks. Now Mark has cats. He put them in this story too. Mark gets ideas for many of his books from things he did as a boy. Then he adds a twist or two to make his stories really funny. I personally really like this story. This is one of my favorite stories. I look forward to it. I always put it towards the end of every year because I think it's a really fun story to kind of wind down the year to. So I think it's so funny. I think it's cute. Ike is hilarious. If I had a dog like Ike, I'm not sure if I would think it was so funny, but in this case, Ike is hilarious. Okay, now, what I want you to do is let's look at the questions on page 437. Let's see. So, I want you to choose out of numbers 1 through 5, I want you to choose 3 questions. You can choose any of those 3 questions in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And I want you to answer them in your notebook. Make sure you number them. You don't have to write the question. And then write the answer underneath your vocabulary from this story. Okay, so you can do that right now. And then that's your independent practice. And then your homework tonight is to do a 30-minute reading log. Okay, that's it for today's reading lesson. If you have any questions about this story or drawing conclusions, please reach out to me today between 1 and 5 p.m.